Good evening. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. Tonight is Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. Thank you all for being here this evening. As a reminder, our order of events is a little bit different tonight. We're following the call to order. I'll give a few remarks and then we'll have some follow-up discussion from our January 4th meeting, and then we'll follow with public comment at the end. So if we think of our budget process in stages, up to this point, we've been looking at a detailed introduction to the budget. We're really still there. We're really still trying to understand what the components that we'd be discussing are. And that will continue through tonight. On the 28th, we'll start reflecting on the budget in a lot more, we'll start reflecting more. We'll delve deeper, discuss our priorities, and ensure that our budget truly reflects our goals while considering the constraints imposed by current environment of rising costs. On the 4th, we'll hear from the community. That's our public hearing. This will be the community's opportunity to share their input and concerns. And then following that, we'll have another opportunity to deliberate. And finally, on the 11th, we'll finalize our deliberations and vote on the budget. I will emphasize that, of course, the district's budget is not merely an exercise in accounting, but it's a deep reflection of our values and our aspirations for the education of our children. The decisions before us are complex and often agonizing. We face, for us and for our administration, we face a delicate balancing act, honoring the needs of our students, respecting the hard-earned tax dollars of our community, and navigating the ever-shifting landscape of educational best practices and fiscal realities. Tonight we'll start with the remainder of the presentations. Following that, we'll review the budget questions, particularly identifying significant gaps in information or understanding. And then lastly, we'll talk about the overall budget strategy, where we are on that today. And with that, I will turn it to you, Alan. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone, to our staff, students, and community members here with us this evening. Just as by way of an update, if you looked at materials, you would notice that you would not notice that there's no materials attached for this evening, right? That's because the materials that the board received at the last meeting, we never got to. So we're going to go over those particular materials. Subsequently, we have posted those to the website because we received a few questions from board members that we added in. So like our board members this evening, they have the materials just in front of them, just presented. If you go to the website for additional materials, budget materials, you'll find the Q&As and the presentations are already there. So thank you if you're so inclined to follow along at that level. With that, I'm pleased to have the opportunity here to share a couple of perspectives. The first one on professional learning, and I will turn that over to Amy. We have a budget item here around professional learning, which calls for early releases and late starts at the high schools for PLCs, and Amy's going to talk to that.
Thank you, Dr. Radley. Good evening, everyone. One of the things that we were asked to do, and we think it's also very helpful, is when we're thinking about professional learning and the rationale for professional learning in our school system, is to think about both the educational rationale and the operational impact. Things that we've discussed previously at the board table, we do know that the classroom teacher is the #1 indicator and factor that contributes to student learning outcomes. So investing in our adult learners in the organization is incredibly important. Additionally, we've received feedback through NEASC accreditation, our recent October visit, and also our tri-state recommendation to continue to support the professional learning of our staff. Professional learning communities, we'll talk a little bit more about those in a later slide, but the easiest way to consider what a professional learning community is that's when the classroom teachers and related service providers across the district are able to collaborate and look specifically at student work samples and data points and discuss instructional strategies that are helping students meet with success and achieve, and also look where students may be struggling and together look at instructional strategies that might better meet their needs. Our PDEC committee, which is comprised of teachers throughout the district, is focusing on not only PLCs, but professional development at large, ensuring that we have a systematic and integrated approach. Something that we've also learned from our school climate survey and also through the work of our PDEC is that there's a desire to increase teacher voice and autonomy in professional learning. So part of our rationale for the increase in time is certainly to meet that need. The operational impact, the cost for this is fairly nominal considering the benefits to the system that would be year over year compounded. Additionally, we do recognize that there would be an impact to families and family schedules. So that's something that we anticipate would require more discussion. Why this investment? I've already kind of spoken to most of these points. I'll skip through to the next slide. One of the things I think that we would just want everyone to understand is when we think about investing in professional learning, one of the things that we need to do systemically is consider how do the larger strategic plan goals, board goals and strategic plan goals connect to school and department goals and then teacher goals. All of that should be a through line that connects to student learning outcomes. So as we develop professional learning plans and professional learning systems, one of the things we look for is how do each of these layers of the system support one another toward what we're looking for to achieve with our students across the system, preschool through grade 12. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about is what's the difference between professional learning, professional development, and PLCs. And an easy way to look at this is that professional learning is like the overarching umbrella. Okay, it's like the big bucket. Within that, there are many types of activities that educators engage in. Some of those might be instructional rounds. Some of those might be attending conferences or sessions in district or external conferences. Grade level meetings are a form of professional learning. I would say that when teachers engage in an RTI or SRBI MTSS process, that there's a level of embedded professional learning in that process. Again, the PLCs, and this is where I said we would talk about this a little bit more in the presentation, that's a type of professional learning. And the difference with a PLC, and really the research says it's one of the most powerful forms of professional learning for educators, is that our educators are looking at student work samples, actual student artifacts, and or data points and discussing instructional strategies. So what you're looking at in a PLC is what do we want the students to know relative to grade level standards? How are they doing according, in alignment to those learning targets? What are we doing when they're not meeting those targets? And what are we doing when they are? And how do we shift and share instructional strategies to best meet the needs of all learners? This graphic is just to show that there are types of professional learning that are ongoing throughout the year. So at the center of all professional learning, we want teacher goals and administrator goals to be connected to all of the opportunities that they have for professional learning that exist throughout the entire school year. Again, some of the professional learning types are grade level meetings, PLCs, instructional rounds, faculty meetings. Those happen throughout the school year. What's represented on the outside part of this graphic are how we might envision integrated professional learning that's more on a continuum throughout the school year. So for example, currently we have 3 days in August. During those 3 days, we have convocation, we have our legislative trainings, we talk with our administrative team and our teaching team about the strategic plan priorities. We make alignment and connections to the strategic plan and school and department plans. And then we may have some specific district professional learning. So for example, it will surprise no one. Right now, there's a huge focus on K-3 literacy, play-based learning, for example, at the elementary level. With our current plan, we wouldn't have time again for a full professional learning session with our staff across the grade levels until November. Then we would have a time again in January, like we did last week, and February, and that would be it for the year. What the plan with an increase in professional learning time would allow us to do is to have those kind of touch points in September and October, March and May, where we could take a look at this larger strategic work of the district and these larger focus areas and really connect the work of our staff across the schools. So for example, we would have an opportunity to bring all first grade teachers, right, to focus on any implementation changes in K-3 literacy next year. One of the things I want to focus on is we've been talking with staff and hearing that PLCs, and we've heard the word, have been hijacked often. So PLCs are really meant to be teacher driven, where they're looking at their student work samples and student data. And because there's so much to fit in a small amount of time, sometimes those PLCs have not been pure PLCs and other agenda items have been creeping in. So one of the things that we want to do is to be able to protect the PLC time so it's sacred for that purpose of really looking at student data and student work samples and driving that work forward and keeping the other different types of professional learning, the other types and components outside of the PLC bucket. We also know that we want to make sure that we have more opportunities for teacher voice in their professional learning. One of the things that the board asked for was, what would be a general kind of scope and sequence? What would you kind of do with this time? This is a very broad scope and sequence. It's not meant to provide every little detail. Of course, we know that when we're developing professional learning, we would want to do that with our staff. But Cass, if you don't mind clicking on just the elementary example, they're both linked there, elementary and secondary. But very broadly, and I know the text is small, this is also available online. This scope and sequence shows kind of how would we connect the August opening days PL throughout the year at the elementary level. What would be some things that we would focus on during the early release days? How would we bring the PLC work into that? We, of course, have the 3 hours of contractual time that teachers and administrators gathered for faculty meetings. And then, as you know, we have grade level meetings. Instructional rounds are scheduled per school. But in an integrated systemic professional learning plan, we would want to connect all of these components. Thank you, Cass. And we can just skip right to, there's a secondary example, but very much it follows the same structure. Thank you so much. Okay, so what might this look like? We did draft a calendar that we've actually explored through a few of our discussions with the board. And right now we have 6 professional learning days and 1 teacher workday that takes place in August as far as supporting teachers and setting up classrooms. What this request or proposal is asking for is an additional 5 2-hour early release days to support the work ELP through grade 12. And I will say I'm struck by the power of time for teachers having time together, as I enjoyed time, especially with our pre-K teachers and kindergarten teachers who facilitated a wonderful district-wide professional learning session on play-based learning last week. In addition to those 2 early release days, as you know, the high school already has 10 delayed arrival days for PLCs, and what we would be looking for are 3 additional for a total of 13. The PLCs at the elementary level would continue to happen during the school day, once in every 6-day cycle, and at the middle school, also embedded within the school day. And so that was the calendar there that we've also shown before, and I'm happy to take questions that the board may have.
Okay. Well, we're down 3 members, so we might have less questions than usual, but I'll open it to questions. Sarah, did you have one? Well, I'll look your way.
Sure. Thank you for looking my way. So as you know, I'm a huge proponent of teacher learning, and our kids can't learn unless our adults are learning. So in theory, I support this idea. And to be perfectly frank, what I'm struggling with is adding for teachers when we're potentially taking away from students. And I would love to hear you, I don't know if defend is the right word, but why is this important? And to the layperson, what will this do to improve student learning, student outcomes? Why?
Could you just sort of, you said, why are we doing this instead of?
Just how is this going to help students? How is this going to help students and not just teachers?
So again, we know our teachers are the biggest influence on student learning and student outcomes. Having our teachers work together collaboratively around common students, common experiences, common outcomes for kids, common assessments for kids, interventions for students, or follow-up enrichment opportunities for students. That investment it may seem out the door that why are you even asking for anything given it's a challenging budget? I just don't look at life that way or the scenario this way or the conundrum this way. It's a relatively speaking, it's a relatively low investment for a high return for all staff and all kids. It impacts all kids. It impacts all of our professional staff members. It's also part of the strategic plan in terms of supporting professional learning opportunities. Yes, it'll be a wee bit different. Does it put us on the cutting edge of this? Yes, it does. But I think sometimes that's where we want to be, and that's where we want to lead in this particular arena. I think the board has asked, if even asked me, can you work on retention and recruitment? This is a big retention and recruitment opportunity, because when people sit in front of me in terms of interviewing, they're asking, what do you do for professional development? Okay, what are the opportunities for me here if I stay here? And it's an opportunity also to support the retention of our staff.
I think too, if I could just add that the art of teaching, the art and science of teaching can very much be like a solo endeavor. It can feel very much for teachers like they're on an island. And so much of their work and their craft is obviously when students are immediately before them. So there is something to be said for teachers having the opportunity to step aside, have opportunity when the children, our students, are not with us, and where they can be with their colleagues and really talk about their craft. That I think is this is unique to teaching and learning, that maybe other industries, it's a little bit different. Our work is constantly on. They're constantly on with kids. And so the idea that our teachers I know spend a tremendous amount of time planning before they ever get there with the kids. And they spend a tremendous amount of time reflecting after they dismiss kids. But there's something to be said for engaging in that act of planning and reflecting with colleagues about practice.
It's also an area that it has broad, I'll just describe it as it has broad support from the teachers and the staff in the district. It's just one of the only opportunities you'll probably get to see teachers at a craft level deconstructing standards to understand where students are struggling and how they may respond in kind. So,
Go ahead, Katie. Thank you. Putting aside that this is a new initiative in a budget, the piece that I can't quite wrap my head around is when we talk about the importance of professional learning and investing in our teachers, I do feel as if we're speaking as if it's all or none. And we actually have quite a bit. So I think, the real question that I don't understand is like, why don't we have enough? And should we be looking at streamlining our current time? Like Amy, you had said that there had been conversation about PLC days getting hijacked. So it seems to me that maybe we need to look at our implementation and our execution. Is it really the need for more days and more time, especially at the cost of instructional minutes? Or do we need to look at how we're delivering it currently? Cass, if you could flip back to the slide that shows the current, I thought that was a really good frame of reference. Yes, perfect. Right there. So, I see that the elementary teachers, every 6-day cycle, they are working together. MMS every week with their teams, right? And then, DHS already has the model, which is tough. They have a different model, but that's significant to me. So why is that not enough?
So I would say that is typical. Most school districts have that embedded kind of team meeting time, grade level planning time. It is a very fair question to ask. I think the difference is that's unique to a school. So we can't really pull together, for example, the entire first grade to have consistent professional learning across a grade level. Their grade level meetings are all at different times, right? Even though, even if we try to get them on consistent schedules, there are parts of the school schedules that make that challenging to get them all across 5 schools at the same time. So I think it just provides a different opportunity, again, for more systemic work. We wouldn't be the first district that has release time where students are released for staff to work together in a collaborative setting. It is a value added. There are some districts that do this weekly. So it's where, you want to make your investment for staff.
Any other questions, Robin?
I have a few questions. First of all, and I had a similar question to Katie's, because I had thought when this was presented to the curriculum committee that Darien already has, I think, more PLC days and time in professional learning than the other Durham 8 districts. So that was one question that I had, because I had, and a clarification, the early release days, those 5, are those for grades K through 12? Because I thought those were only for the elementary schools when this was initially talked about.
It was for ELP through grade 12.
Okay, so the high school, for instance, would be adding 5 early release days plus 3 additional PLC delayed opening days for a total of 13. So I just question because we also then would be losing instructional time, and particularly at elementary level when we're implementing a new K-3 literacy initiative, that loss of additional instructional time for the students is one concern that I would want to understand a little bit better.
So what I can say is there is strong research, and despite the fact that there is a loss of instructional time, that investing in teacher professional learning does increase student learning outcomes. And there are districts throughout the state, I would say, that have found that. Right now you think about pulling teachers away from the classroom for professional learning or grade level across the district, and you're having to pull them offline from teaching, as we would say. This should limit the impact of that. And again, the greatest, I think, benefit of something like this, for example, especially at the elementary level with the 2-hour early release days, is to be able to bring full grade levels together for professional learning. You really can't do that without the after school time, because you wouldn't be able to, and you wouldn't want to pull staff offline from teaching children, that number of staff.
Just to follow up then, I mean, in the existing PLC days that we have, when you talk about them being hijacked to some extent, isn't there an opportunity where we could do some of this during that time and maybe give some of the state mandated stuff a little bit less time? But I'm just trying to understand like priorities.
So I'll have March actually speak a little bit to the state mandated time, if that's okay. There, I think, are in 18 minimal hours and counting. So there literally aren't enough hours to do all of the state mandated trainings. And I would say those are trainings, exactly that. They're not professional learning opportunities. They don't really have to do with the science and art of teaching and learning. There are things like DCF mandated reporter, human trafficking, bloodborne pathogens, all of those things. That's not really professional learning. Those are trainings. When we talk about could we use some of the PLC time for district learning, the function of a PLC is different because again, that's when teachers are looking at student work samples and student data points. So that's driven by the teachers and what kind of their focus of inquiry is, looking at the students before them and their instructional strategies. That's different than, for example, pulling together and all of the kindergarten teachers to talk about play-based learning.
Right. I think I was maybe referring to professional learning days where we actually have time set out. That it's just really a question of it. Could we use some of our existing days and get some of this work done, which I realize is important, and we need to be able to do that.
That's what we're doing. So right now we have the 3 days in August to kick off the start of the year, which includes convocation. It includes some of those mandated trainings. I don't know if March has anything else to add about that. And then our next opportunity is November. Then we have, January. After February, that will be it until the following August. As far as those larger chunks of time to work on kind of systemic work across the grade level.
Certainly these days would be, we would be up there, right? In terms of the DERG, the closest probably is Wilton that has 13 early releases and 6 professional days. That sort of brings us in some sort of alignment with that. An investment in this is not mutually exclusive from investing in the teachers and investing in our students, whether it's K-3 literacy or whether it's AP calculus, right? And I can understand the dilemma, right? And time we're compliant with the time. We're not as if it's not as if we're out of compliance with the time. I don't want to. Well, I'm leading into it, but it's also a wee opportunity for the late arrival stuff. That's not the purpose of doing it. Okay, that's just a tangential, perhaps benefit to it. But I just see this as a way in supporting our staff and directly supporting our students.
Joanna. So one of my concerns is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum as Robin's, with more, 5 potential more days out of instructional time at the high school. AP classes in particular have to cover a large amount of curriculum. For instance, AP US history, they do a whole unit before school starts because there's not enough time to literally get through it all before the AP exam. So one of my questions is, how do you account for all that missed time? And then my other question is how this is sort of set up as a way that leaves a great burden on parents, especially our elementary aged kids. if it's really about having more time to get teachers together, is there not a way to do this where we have extra, a full day or a full 2 days, and that therefore we only we don't have to pay for extra buses. We do lose the income from the cafeteria at the high school and other lunches, but was that ever explored?
I think really what our focus was trying to put more integrated opportunities throughout the year. So that's why it was half days, not full days. And we also tried to place the days where we thought, although it's a burden for families, where we see lower student attendance, around those other holidays and days off. So we thought that that might be facilitated. And, there are many districts that West Hartford does this once a week. They have time for staff to be together. So it is a burden. Districts and communities work on kind of figuring that out together if that's an investment that the community wants to make.
The half day sort of spreads out the learning opportunities. At least I'll talk for the high school as they look at their PLC time. These other half days provide opportunities along the way as opposed to just discrete times at the start and at the end.
Dave.
Thanks. I'll try and be quick. Just a couple comments looking at this proposal. One, it was just mentioned a burden on the parents with the rescheduling, the cost taking away classroom time, and just a number of things have been discussed. Alan, you mentioned briefly, anecdotally, that some people, you feel this is a retention tool. They ask about this when they join the district. One of the other things we've been given is the survey from the teachers. Problem with this survey from the teachers, when I look at that, is I find it far from persuasive because I don't know how many teachers you're going to get coming against one of your proposals for the budget. So I appreciate what you're trying to do with the survey. The problem is I just can't really judge in the whole general scheme of things, whether that's accurate or not accurate. So that unfortunately is not helping convince me. One point you did mention earlier tonight was that this is a small investment for a big return. Can you convince me by showing me some ideas along what are those returns? How do you measure those returns? How do you specifically tie those back to this initiative? And how you're going to collect that data. So that would be an interesting fact to see if you can provide it. Not right now, but certainly in the next meeting.
Okay. One more.
Just one more question. On the Board of Ed question, the document, the memo, Rich, that you had provided to us, one question that had been asked was the cost if we just did the 5 additional elementary school early release days, and that was $58,000. Why is that such a high cost? Is that both busing and food as well, or?
So it's both, but you have more buses when you do just the 5 days. When it's just the high school, you're only looking at the 9 buses. You do it district wide or just even at the elementary schools, you're looking at 25 buses.
So it doesn't just shift the buses, it's actually making additional buses versus, okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Amy and
You're
Helen.
welcome.
Okay, thank you. So we make a wee transition here to look to add something to the budget to a scenario of where we had to realize some efficiencies, and this is the paraprofessionals and the elimination of the paraprofessionals, instructional paraprofessionals, some of which you are here this evening. That's an efficiency of over $1 million, which has been hard to realize in the district. But with that, we'll make the presentation addressing the questions that the board had, and Marge and Amy will lead us through.
So again, this is challenging to talk about because we do know that our paraeducators have a tremendous impact on the students that they've developed relationships with over the years. So in a challenging budget climate, when we're thinking about a potential reduction needing to get to the number that we've been discussing, think about the educational rationale and operational impact of this kind of budget modification. What we would do is we would have 10 interns take the role that the paraeducators have been fulfilling in the classrooms. It should be said that our paraeducators really do provide a support role, not only to students, but to staff. They're not meant to provide an instructional role to take small groups. The teacher should be doing that. And as well, interns can only have them. But they have provided a lot of support in the classroom. Our interns also are pre-service teachers, so they're enrolled in professional learning programs and certification programs for their teaching degrees. In the case when you have an intern, both the teacher intern and the teacher mentor are both benefiting from a professional learning perspective. An intern can teach classes again because they're pre-service without supervision. And we've also talked about the fact that having interns in district, and I think we've seen this, creates a pipeline for teaching talent in the district. I recently, in my hometown, came across someone who has had a student teaching placement. She told me in Darien Public Schools, she knew I worked here and how thrilled she was. And I know she hasn't been here yet, but I could tell she's someone who would be very interested, I'm sure, in staying when she has the chance to have the Darien experience. So it does provide a pipeline. The operational impact, Marge is going to address that.
Right. So again, not to minimize the wonderful paraeducators that we have working for us now, but the operational impact will be relatively minimal because over the past few years since COVID, when teacher absences on average have gone from about 6.5 days a year to over 12 days a year, the paraprofessionals have been pulled to cover classes. So we're not seeing them as much as instructional support people in the classroom. They're covering teachers. And so really, we're revising the budget to reflect what's really going on, and to use interns and permanent building subs is a more cost-efficient way to do that.
Okay, so we've indicated with this reduction, there would be a savings of over $1 million. We're talking about the current 3 paraeducators at each elementary school now who assist primarily in kindergarten and grade 1, who assist with supervision at recess, arrival, and dismissal. And we would have those duties be performed by 2 interns per school. A question was asked about, a day in the life, and this is what the expectation is according to the job description. I think anybody who actually has been in a school could imagine that it's very difficult to capture on one slide what a day in the life is actually like for a paraeducator or a teacher, because they're very responsive roles and they change based on what the kids and the staff needs are. But very, very broadly, they have a morning meeting. They're there with the teacher and the students to support the morning meeting, how we begin our day. They're there to provide grade level support. They take direction from the teacher, again, to provide support in the classroom for the overall functioning operation of the classroom. They have a lunch. They provide additional grade level support in the afternoon. They're also helping with arrival and dismissal. As you know, it's important, especially as our kindergarten students are first transitioning into the school year. I'm sure that's where we spend a lot of time. A day in the life reality, as Marge already indicated, unfortunately, because of just the need to fill vacancies in classrooms on a day-to-day basis, paraeducators have largely, the data shows, been pulled to support that function, to provide coverage. There's been a little table here that's been made and developed to show the difference between largely globally a para role, intern role, and substitute role.
Right. And I will say, when it says that paraeducators primarily assist in K and first grade, that was the intention when we eliminated a paraeducator last year and replaced them with a permanent building substitute. But it hasn't worked out that way. Anecdotally, at one of our schools last week, of 3 instructional paras, 1 was absent and 2 were covering classes. So again, in a perfect world, they'd be primarily assisting in K and first grade, but that hasn't been the case.
Okay, and Marge and I are happy to take questions.
I just want to say that for people who are here and people who are not here as paraprofessionals, they are some of the most loyal, dedicated, hardworking people that there are. There's no question about that. And they help our kids and they help our staff, and we're not questioning that at all.
Dave?
Thanks. Mr. Deneen's not here, so I'll ask Marge, is this really a substitute problem or is this a paraprofessional problem at the top?
It's a teacher absence problem. And I will say, as I said before, we used to be on the high end, but if you look at EdSite, we are below the state average now of teacher absences.
And so I guess stepping back for a moment, are there solutions, strategies, things we can do to address the absentee problem that would perhaps forestall having to go down this route and doing something with paraprofessionals?
So we work with the teachers union, we work with the building principals. We've already had conversations with people who have excessive absences, but you know, in a perfect world, we probably have paras and building subs and interns and whatever, but it's just not an effective use of resources right now. We continue to try to work on teacher and para absences.
Understood. And I guess one last question from the slide, it was 1,000,014. That was the net. Is that a net number or was that the gross just from cutting?
It's the net
salaries?
number.
That's the net number. Thanks, Rich.
Katie. Thank you. I do want to make a clarification, in further materials that we received, and just to confirm, it was estimated that 25% of the para's time is serving as building subs.
So 25% is what we've paid for, but we only pay if they fill in for an excess of 2 hours. So that was based on what we pay for, but it's not indicative of what our principals are telling us.
Well, so even if you were to, say that that is potentially on the low end, what I'm hearing is that the overwhelming majority of their time is in the classroom as it stands. So I share some concerns to Mr. Brown's point of, are we addressing the problem head on or are we not addressing root causes? Because this doesn't seem to me to be a problem with paraprofessionals whatsoever. From my own personal experience as a parent, through grade levels, as a personal experience, subbing, acting as a paraprofessionals, I don't think that you can find more hardworking people that are there for students and because they love them. That we've gotten an amazing, long list of emails from teachers. And what I hear from teachers is not, we need more PLC, it's we need more support. We need support in the classroom. We need support before the classroom. We need support with the kids. So to me, I don't see how this elimination, and I would really not call it an efficiency because there's nothing efficient about removing an adult from a classroom. But this elimination is going against everything that we say makes our schools great. It's a higher ratio for students. It is going to lead to more teacher burnout. It is going to be detrimental to classroom management. We are looking at implementing new curriculum, and we've heard time and again at the curriculum meetings how much time that is going to take and how much extra bodies and conversations need to happen. Additionally, the interns sound great to me. That seems like a no-brainer. I like everything about that program. It's a very low cost. That sounds great. But that's another thing that the teachers have to do as well. And the paraprofessionals also have continuity and longevity that will never come with interns. We just had a presentation on the importance of professional learning. What about the professional learning that we've invested in our paraprofessionals for years? By eliminating them, we're throwing all of that out the window. The people that have been here for decades, that know our students, know our buildings, know our staff. I was at the retirement breakfast this spring, and my son's 17. He's a junior in high school, and the paraprofessional was talking to me about him from elementary, and he wasn't even there the full 5 years, 6 years. So, I have a lot of concerns about this. Frankly, I just can't possibly support it. I think that it's going to stress our elementary classrooms and teachers enormously.
Joanna.
Sort of to piggyback a little bit on what Katie just said, I'm going to channel Julie Best. And I took a deep dive back through our numbers. In the fiscal year 18, we had a ratio of aide to student of 1.97. Next year, if you count 2 interns as aides, it'll be 1.210, 1.318 at Oxbridge, or 1.26864 at Oxbridge if you don't include ELP. So we are stripping away year after year the ratio of adults to students to begin with. But also last year you put in another building sub, right? There was 2, there's 3. Building subs cost more than interns. If we are trying to find a way to save money while still covering classrooms in an efficient way, why don't we go down to 1 building sub and have 3 interns? It just doesn't seem to make sense if that's the primary reason for bringing them in.
So if I may I want to be very clear. It's not the paraprofessionals like it's not, they're the problem. They weren't the problem. They're not the problem. That's not what's on the table, so to speak. But when we have transitioned to having more times of the paraprofessionals' time being spent in class coverage, regardless of what the reason is, or we can continue to work on the root cause or the absenteeism that they're covering, right? And so on and so forth. We can do that. That's not going to be overnight. But it just seems like an expensive way to go. And also, I would just say that the instructional the interns, they have more instructional pedagogy experience than our paraprofessionals do. With all due respect, everybody, with all due respect to paraprofessionals, I don't want them doing instruction. Right? They're not the instructional experts. Yes, we want them to help our students. Yes, we want them to give a bit of organization in the groups. Yes, we want for them to help kids as we transition to recess and different things. But this also touches on a wee bit of a different model. And I understand it's not just like clear, but the interns have more instruction around pedagogy than our paraprofessionals do. That being said, yes, I wouldn't put it on the table if I wasn't in the situation that I'm in. But given the situation I'm in, given the way we have transitioned the use of our paraprofessionals, I think this is a reasonable model, and it's also an instructionally sound model.
I think staying on the subject of the ratio of adults to children, in my time on the board, we have increased different kinds of adults at the same time. Like we've added campus monitors, we've added in security officers, we've added in psychologists, we've increased the number of adults, an AP, 2 APs actually, in the building. So I appreciate that the number of aides is different, but just back to the basic math, it's 3 paras, 2 interns. So what is the thinking there in terms of how they would be deployed and how that matches the coverage?
Well, the first thing we would do is cover teacher absences. So it isn't a one-to-one swap, but I think that we're hoping that we'll be able to improve attendance. And again, right now, our principals are telling us that paras are not spending much time in the KM1 classroom. It isn't really even an expectation of most of our teachers anymore, because they're not only being covered for teacher absences, but teacher meetings, PPTs, 504s, whatever. So it's not a one-for-one swap. I think it would be aggressive to put 3 interns in each school. But we'll work with what we have.
Sarah?
Can you just speak to a little bit of the interns' requirements from their preparatory programs? Like what the 10 weeks that they are student teaching, they are effectively out of circulation, right? So can you speak to that and what that would look like in the schools? And
So what we did in the past was we would stagger. When we had 2 interns, we would stagger. So one would start in August and one would start in January. That way we could stagger their student teaching experience. So there will be 10 weeks when they won't be available to cover.
so under that model, there would be just 1 for the entire school.
1 and 3 permanent building subs and lunch monitors.
Sorry,
Go ahead. Yeah.
just a clarification. You say lunch monitors cover classrooms all day long?
Nope, lunch monitors cover lunch and recess. We need people for duties as well.
Okay, thank you.
So they're not in the classroom.
Katie?
Coming back to the concept of the ratios and the, going from 3 people down to 2. This is a larger issue because it's not just about paras or interns, but did anybody talk about why it would be the same number across 5 elementary schools when one elementary is almost double another?
So this year we did give Oxbridge 4 permanent building subs and they only filled 3, actually 2 and a part-time one. So it was just based on what the principals were telling us they need.
And you tried to get 4 for Oxbridge, but now the proposal is just to put 2 interns.
Well, we eliminated the 4th for the budget next year because it was never filled. Not because everyone else is full. So they just didn't appear to need it.
But there's still the 3 building subs.
Yes.
Or 3 buildings.
In addition to the 2 interns.
Yes.
Dave?
Just to go back, Alan, to the point on the education. So with the interns, I mean, you mentioned formal training. You mentioned that we have the buildings, the paraprofessionals who have not been trained, but they certainly have a long experience, right, in the
Oh,
classroom?
yes.
And so I guess where there's formal classroom learning that we'll have more of for the interns, we'll have more for new teachers. I think when we onboard new teachers here in district, we spend an awful lot of time shadowing them, bringing them up to speed, making sure they understand how things work. So it may not be formal book learning that our people right now have in the classroom, but they have extensive amounts of experience. Like to me, having interns work with them would be great to their learning curve for the interns. Like to me, this is a great opportunity to have the lower cost working together with that extensive classroom experience. So I just don't understand why formal book learning is necessarily preference over somebody who's been in the classroom for as long. I guess maybe to some degree there's instructional expertise that exists from studying it a little bit more, but I would think if you've lived it for decades, you're
Like
probably okay with it.
You'd have to recognize too that the interns are starting out in their career, right? I mean, let's be honest about that. They're just starting out in their career. We've invested quite a bit of professional development in our paraprofessionals, and our paraprofessionals take us up on our training. So I'm not disputing that point.
Yeah, I guess, so I guess it's perhaps not as stark a distinction in some ways.
Well, again, pedagogy wise, I would want trained staff. Now, here's another thing. I'll just put this on the table. Say occasionally, but it's not unusual that we have a paraprofessional who transitions to be a teacher, which is a great thing, right? So that's not out of the realm of possibility either. I share that because that's how close they are to the next level of learning and pedagogy. But there is a difference between having educational training in the classroom, instructional training in the classroom. But I recognize your point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just, pedagogical aside, I would think that hands-on experience can be more valuable in some cases than book learning. So I don't see it as completely stark one or the other. So just trying to delve and understand a little deeper.
Are there some contractual differences in terms of the ability to deliver direct instruction? I think there are some differences that would help to understand.
Contractually?
Maybe not contractually, but they're different employment classes. So I think we're not talking about, it's not swapping so much one for the other.
Oh, yeah, no, totally get that. Wasn't suggesting, I was just saying, I mean, there's the example that was back in law school. Like if you want to have somebody be an expert witness, they can come up and tell you I have a degree in this and I have a degree in that. And great, you're an expert. You know, if somebody come up and be, yep, I'm a janitor. I'm off the force for 32 years. You're now an expert witness in janitors. So if we have somebody who's been in the classroom for decades, they're pretty much an expert for the classroom. So I don't think we should lose sight of that fact.
Sarah. I just want clarity on that 1.14 number. Is that inclusive of benefits that include, like, if every paraprofessional or paraeducator took benefits, or is that currently those 15 people?
So we looked at, so there are only one class of paras, whether you're a special ed para or an instructional para. So it's the least senior staff members who would bump. So we did look at the individual who would bump out and what benefits that they had.
Okay, thank you.
Robin?
This is a little bit of a different approach, but in the RC 24, the special education paras, we have about 101 of them. And the current ratio is about a 1-to-10, one para per 10 students with IEPs. So one question is, given, and we've increased those paras 28, I believe, Rich, over the past few years. So my question would be, given that that is a relatively low staffing ratio, is there any additional capacity that those paras could help to fill in the gaps to the extent that they might already be in the elementary schools, for instance, just for kindergarten or first grade, to help potentially fill in with some of the instruction? And they already have the training. They obviously have excellent skills. And it's just a question, just in terms of the existing staffing that we do have.
If I may answer, no, because the can't do a ratio, because those are recommended by PBTs. So whether it's a paraeducator who's being recommended for an individual student or a shared paraeducator for 2 students, they're recommended specifically for those students who have IEPs and are being supported by them.
So they are fully utilized in terms of their available caseload and hours.
In fact, some of the shared paras are scheduled at different periods. They may only be scheduled for ELA or for math or for a middle school for social studies. So they're scheduled throughout the day for different children who might share them. And typically when it's a one-to-one paraeducator, it's with one student throughout the day.
Okay, I just was, it's more of an issue of capacity and if there's excess capacity. And it also gets to one question with specifically with kindergarten and first grade. If we don't have the paras now in kindergarten and first grade helping, which I believe was what we had intended to have happen, is there a concern that in the absence of that potentially children could end up falling behind or if they're not getting the instructional attention that they need, that we could have more students going into what was SRBI or potentially being identified for special education, especially as we're implementing a new K-3 literacy initiative this coming year, which will take additional instructional time. So that's really something that I think we're also hearing feedback from teachers and paras as well. So and parents. Just would love to have information on that.
So I don't know that anyone, Rama, can answer a question of what would be, that would be an unfair question. What I can say though, instructional paras in the classroom are there to support all children and to support the classroom teacher. They're not seen as an interventionist. They're not seen as an.
I'm not saying that.
So I don't think that you can measure or assess if they can be a pre-referral and interventionist, because that's not their role. I think you can look at other forms of interventionists that we have, whether they're actual interventions in ELA or math, whether they're doing tier 1 interventions such as our SRBI or an MTSS. But I don't think we look to instructional paras for that sort of position or support.
I'm sorry. I think you misunderstood. They work with children in the differentiated groupings, I believe, in some of the small groups to help with
Some of the,
various things.
some of the rumors going around the community are, in fact, we heard the head of the teachers union say it point blank, that if we reduce paraprofessionals in the classroom, then we'll have an increased identification rate.
Yeah, I don't
Please
see,
address that.
I don't see a nexus between that, and I don't see evidence to support it.
I have never, someone could AI it and we could get an answer to it, but I am unaware of any research that talks about paraprofessionals not having them would result in children transition into special education. Actually, to be honest with you, I'm more familiar with research that says with paraprofessionals, we stage stuff too much, we structure stuff too much, and actually can hold kids back a little bit. I say it all respectfully. That's not. This is just the nature of this conversation at the moment. But I'm not aware of anything that's going to happen. That's.
And if I can just add to that, Dr. Adley, Robin, to your question, I think the instructional paraeducators support children in the class. I'm not suggesting they don't, and I recognize their value. What I am saying is that their role is not really to do pre-intervention or instruction, or it's really to support the teachers, to participate in the class and support all students. But I don't see that that is their role, nor is it their expectation. I think there are personnel in the staff, which are certified personnel. Their role is to do that, is to do pre-referral, whether it's a psychologist or speech therapist or an OT or PT or other instructional supports.
Amy, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I think that Shirley said it really pretty succinctly.
Okay. Joanna?
Paras might not be doing any pre-intervention, but who's with the students when your teachers are doing tier 1 intervention? And especially if we have interns that are just running around covering classrooms, who's in the classroom? Like if you have a group of kindergartners and you have a teacher just working with 2 of them, who's watching the other 20?
Teachers are skilled at deciding what they need to do to pull small group and how do they develop activities that other students will do. Also, students do some independent work, which is what we want them to do even in kindergarten. So teachers design that as part of their lesson plan. So they think about their readers workshop block and they develop some parts again that are whole group instruction, some that are small groups, some individual conferring. Teachers confer individually, and then every other student is kind of not with the teacher at that point. So teachers set up their classroom environment and their instructional plans to accommodate for that. That's part of their training.
Okay, but do paras help with that? Instructional paras, not special ed paras.
Instructional paras do provide support, like Shirley said, to the teacher.
Thank you.
Go ahead, March.
But I will say that again, from our principals, it's less and less often that paras are available to do that kind of monitoring of small groups because they're being pulled. I mean, one of the principals said to me just the other day, at this point, teachers don't even complain when the paras get pulled because they know it's going to happen. So again, in a perfect world, would they be in there, but they're getting pulled to cover classes.
So
Sarah?
in a perfect world, if you're thinking about the K1 classes across the district, would there be a instructional para in the classroom at some point every day? Is that how it's scheduled to be?
I'm going to have to defer to the educators. That was the design this year, but
In a perfect world, if the budget would allow, but I can say that many districts throughout the state have had to move away from that model. And the general classroom teacher is the primary support person for not
Right.
only tier one.
But is it the
tier two as
expectation
well.
of Darien this year that there is somebody I'm an elementary school teacher. Should I expect to have someone in there every day?
Not necessarily in K1, the principals, generally speaking, will disperse and use our paraprofessionals for K-1, but on any given day, they can be somewhere else, but primarily, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just answer that other question, Joanna, a little bit. And again, I'm not pushing back on people, but I'm just sharing. Often is the case that our younger students can actually model the independence in group work and individually that you want to see in our older kids more than the older kids exhibit. I mean, that's just, if you ask some educators, you may say, Dr. Adley, that's crazy. Well, it's not crazy, okay? It doesn't mean to say, though, that having someone in kindergarten or first grade is not what you wanted. I understand all my teachers wanting assistants and paraprofessional assistants at those particular grade levels. I can understand it, but it doesn't necessarily just play out that way. And our younger kids can exhibit those attributes, and our teachers are trained to actually bring that out in the kids.
Rich and Marge, you definitely provided us some comps before from other districts. Is it in this packet? Or is it in an older packet?
So in the nearby area, Ridgefield does not have instructional paras and Greenwich does not have instructional.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, but that means everyone else does.
Okay. I think we
May
can
I proceed?
transition.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
please. Thank
so-
you all.
So we had some format of participation fees, and we've discussed this at the board table many times and many years in different situations. Rich is going to share a couple of models that some of them we've seen before. Maybe there's one that is relatively new. I would say if the board decides to go down participation fees for a certain amount, we can settle on the model, whatever it happens to be, but that even that decision remains to be seen. But so Rich will just go through the models.
So we've talked about participation fees in the past. It is far less common for districts to have participation fees for clubs. The only district in Fairfield County that we could find that charges a fee for clubs is Wilton. They do charge $50 for a club in high school and then $25 for middle school clubs. It is more common for districts to charge athletic participation fees if they're to charge a fee. Though it's also split. If we look at the DERG, Ridgefield, Weston, and Wilton all charge a fee, but Westport and Darien, Westport, Darien, and New Canaan do not. You'll see the fees range anywhere from $250 at a high for Monroe to $100 as a low in Weston and Bethel. And typically, districts that have a fee have what's called a family cap. And so a family cap is an amount that a family can't exceed, and it's usually the total of 4 sports. So for example, if you had 2 kids and they both play 3 sports, the most you would pay if it was $100 fee would be $400. And so essentially those last 2 sports would be waived. If we go to the next slide, the current proposal that's in the superintendent budget is a modified fee, just looking at non-CIAC sports. So rugby, skiing, squash, and sailing. It would be a fee to cover the cost associated with those sports, excluding the cost of the coach's stipend, which is $340 per sport. And then you'll see they also, some of those sports do have a rental fee. And so you'll see the fee range anywhere from $340 to just over $900. As Dr. Adley mentioned, We showed all three options. Really, there are an infinite number of options if you were going to have a fee determining what the dollar amount would be. We looked at 100, 150, and 200. Really, it could be anywhere in between. As you saw, some districts have 125 or 160 or 165. So it really just depends on the number. So one option would be a $100 flat fee and a $340 fee for non-CIC sports with a family cap of 400. Again, those 4 sports. What we call student interest clubs at the high school, $50 similar to Wilton. Middle school clubs, a flat fee of $50. And then intramurals at the middle school for $50 as well. We would not charge at the elementary school. The enrollment for the clubs at the elementary school is pretty minor. There are only 3 at each elementary school. So based on current participation numbers and projected participation numbers, this would be about $312,000. And then obviously we would offer subsidies for those who have either are on free lunch, reduced lunch, or have economic hardships. A second option potentially could be, that should say 150, but 150 and then 340 with a family cap of 600. So again, that 4-sport model. You could then look at just doing fees on student interest clubs at the high school at $50 and then exempt the elementary and the middle school. Again, fees for clubs tend to be less common across Connecticut. This would raise about $350,000. And again, that's because of the higher fee amount of 150. Option 3 could be flat fee of $200 per sport. And again, a family cap of 800, those 4 sports. The $200 would be similar to Ridgefield. And then you could choose to do no fees for any student interest club, whether it's the high school or the middle school. And that would be $334,000. Again, these are the 3 we showed. I mean, you could have an infinite number of options if you wanted to go down this route, just depending on the dollar amount and whether or not you'd want to do just sports, or would you want to do sports and clubs? Would you want to do sports and clubs only at the high school, not the middle school? So it really depends on the model that you'd want to look at.
All right, so we had just asked for a reminder of what some of the fee programs look like, given that there are some fees in the current proposal. We wanted to understand what's out there in the universe and what you guys had modeled for us. Are there any questions on these specific models? Robin?
Just, Rich, one question, because you had previously given us a memo about a year ago that showed if you did charge like a $50 fee at elementary, that's like 40,000 in revenue. Is that still around the same?
So it would be assuming no students drop out. I mean, it could be a potential that a student does like safety club, for example, and if you're charging them $50, they might not want to run, but assuming the same level of participation.
Thank you.
Katie?
Were there any options that took into account the inequities that currently exist? So for example, option 2 is furthering inequity. We do not fund our clubs the way that we fund our athletics. So levying fees is furthering an inequity. Same thing with sports. We could go down, probably every sport is a little bit different. Some cut, some don't. Some provide protective equipment, some don't. Some cost several $1,000s per player, some cost, $100 per player. So did any model look at trying to solve for the existing inequities? For example, a percentage of per player cost.
So last year, I think it was Mr. Maroney proposed a 70-30 split for fees, similar to the rental. Then you would have fees that would range from a few $100s to a few $1,000s. So that wasn't really looked at. We don't know of any district that does like a percentage of cost allocated to parents if there is a fee. The common use for those districts that have fees is a flat dollar amount. So, yeah.
Just a point of clarification. I think there's a difference between an inequity, which might be you were talking about more equipment. There are sports with different cost structures. That's not necessarily inequitable in that our students may have different needs in a district, and that's not necessarily
Well,
inequitable.
what I would say is inequitable, I would argue, looking at this from a family perspective.
Right.
So let's say that we have a family who has a player on sport team A.
Mhm.
And sport team A provides all protective equipment. Okay, so they do everything from headgear to any padding. They provide everything. The school pays for all of that, pays for coaching, buses, everything. Family B has a player who is on a different sport that also needs helmet, protective equipment, but that is parent provided. Okay, so now we take these two athletes on different sports. And in this case, the parents are not buying any of the equipment. And in this case, the parents are. Add on top of that, that this one might have a higher cost, but now we're levying the same amount of tax. So parent A pays only $100 fee, but parent B pays for their kids' helmets, their kids' padding, their kids', whatever. And they're levy the same tax. That is inequitable to me.
We've asked the question about protective equipment. Chris isn't here, but can someone on the administration speak to that? Maybe Rich.
So my understanding from Chris is they provide a certain number of, let's say, helmets. And if it's like baseball, they're shared helmets. If the individual athlete wants their own specific helmet, the parent would buy their own specific helmet, or if they wanted a certain type of helmet as opposed to what's provided by the district. But it's not as if we don't provide any safety equipment. But there are certain players and families that decide they don't want to use the shared model and they'll buy their own.
Sarah, go ahead.
Is this alternative 3, is that flat 200 sport, does that include? That's excluding the 70-30 rental split, right? So like the squash family would pay 900 in addition to
Correct.
the 200. Okay.
So all of these fee structures maintain the rent.
So all of them maintain the existing rental.
Did we look at smoothing out including smoothing out the rental costs?
There would not really be a way to do it unless you had a much higher per student fee for everything else, because of the cost of the rental facilities.
So if we did smooth it out, what would that do to it? Would it take us to 0?
I mean, if you were to like smooth it out where you had no rental fee whatsoever, I mean, we would have to work it up, but I would imagine the fee would be in excess of $500 per family, probably much more than that.
Just to cover costs?
Correct.
Rich, isn't our average cost, like just taking the whole spreadsheet that you gave, it's literally like, I think it's almost $1,000 or maybe 750 per athlete based on the actual costs, not even including the rentals. And if you include rentals, it's over $1,000 per athlete.
That's correct. For all varsity,
So,
junior
and
varsity.
I mean, I think trying to do something like that, which is what Dennis had proposed, I think in a recent year, would be pretty costly. And the families that I believe hockey was one of the big ones because we didn't have a rink and they wanted to have the sport. And so they agreed to pay for the ice time, and those sports are they have the most expensive rental fees for that reason.
That's correct. So hockey is between $1,400 and $1,500, and then squash is a little over $500, right?
Just point of clarification, to be clear, like if you look at our budget book, there's a wide swing. And I'm not picking on any sports here at all. I'm just looking, for example, baseball is over $2,500 per player cost. And track and field, $314. That's a huge difference. The other thing I just want to note is that this is another budget implication that affects students. We will have lower participation, like students will stop participating. It's unfortunate to me that we're asking our students to carry so much of this burden.
Just to be clear, we are contemplating a lot of different budgetary structures at the moment. We have made, other than restoring the idea, we've made no decisions. So just so the public is clear, this is all deliberation. And we want to understand the components of all it. Okay, any other quick, Sarah?
I just want to clarify for certainty for the public that if there are free or reduced lunch students, that they would be exempt from any fee.
So there are scholarship forms, so a free
Yes.
student gets it waived, reduced students slightly less. And then even if those students have like an economic hardship where maybe they don't qualify for free and reduced lunch, maybe there are two parent working situation and maybe one lost their job, they can qualify for economic hardship.
we have again discussed this for several years now.
Yeah.
We may not have hit on the right model, whatever that is, taking into consideration all the variables, but I'd be pretty confident that should the board, if the board wants to do something of this nature, then we'll take everybody's considerations, and I'd rather work on it that way than
So going forward, how do we? I'm just thinking to the 28th of the modifications, like, how do we think about this?
Well, do you want to finish this, the whole discussions first of all?
And then come back to the higher level.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just one comment. I know in other districts, and this is outside the state of Connecticut, there are schools that varsity and, high school players have to buy their own uniforms every year on every team. We do not do that. So part of the thinking of potentially doing some kind of a participation fee would be inclusive of things like that. And there are teams in Darien where they need to purchase a new uniform every single year. And, we do not require them to purchase a uniform either. So yes, you're right. It might be a little inequitable potentially, but if it's across the board for everyone, we have had parents also say, we would prefer that it's equal for everyone instead of picking certain ones and doing things differently, which is kind of what we do right now. So I know that there are both sides to this.
Okay, any other questions on this topic? No, okay.
Thank you. We'll go to the board questions from the fourth. So I'll just show you, sort of give you a sense of how this is structured. So the questions were, as we received the message for the prior meeting, if you just scroll down, Ms. Philpott, please, just you come to one of the gray areas.
That's great.
That's great. I thought it made sense. Okay, all right. Maybe on your hard copy, you can see the gray areas. Those are the additional questions that came in. So what we did was we took, if it's RC1, we put them in with RC1. If they were, 5 and 6, we slipped them in there. Next thing probably will just be to literally order them as question 1 through whatever, but that's kind of.
So it's a little different than what we used to get a document every time we had a meeting. And so what we've done is move to a table structure so that it's the RC, it's the date it was asked, it's the question, and that way we can keep track of it by RC.
That was
Thank you for
that was the thought. So
Thank you for that.
so with that,
And we'll take it as RC by RC.
that's basically, yes. So I'm not going to read every answer. So if there's questions about these, and we'll be happy to address them. So RC1, I guess, is up.
Okay. Any questions about what's on this content in RC1?
RC1, just a quick question, if I may.
Sure.
In the Wellness Center, are people badging in or are we signing in?
No, they're not badging in. They're signing in.
Thank you.
Anyone else on RC1? Robin?
A question on the mental health spend. We had a spreadsheet that was provided with total costs that have been spent. So the question I have, a couple questions. First of all, the psychology interns, which currently is about a $68,000 cost for us. This would be in addition to our current 18 psychologists that are on staff, and I'm including the 5 at the elementary schools as part of that. What is the purpose of the psychology interns in that $68,000? Because I don't think that we've had a need, or we haven't had empty positions of psychologists not being able to be filled. So I'm just interested in what the interns do.
I believe Dr. Dad and Dr. McCarthy did a presentation on the interns and
And
just to go back to,
budget.
it really wasn't to supplement any of our services. It really is a professional opportunity to really train them and work with them. They do work under the auspices of certified staff. We are working and professionally training them as well. And they do support students both in the classroom as well as in individual small groups and supporting all students within the buildings.
March.
And we actually have used a few of them to fill in for some long-term medical leaves where otherwise students might have gone without services.
So that mental health worksheet, it does not include special education per se, right? Because there are times where students are outplaced or otherwise for different reasons. It doesn't include counselors that provide some mental health for our students. It doesn't deal with times from principals or assistant principals. So there's a couple of categories that are not there. It's just hard to quantify. We just tried to line it up to numbers that were in the book, if you know what I mean.
Yes, Joanna.
So just piggybacking on that, the IDEA psychologist listed here, how do they fit into the bigger ecosystem of what we have across all schools?
When you say IDEA, you're saying these.
Well, it's number
not the-
13 on the list here.
So it's a psychologist funded out of the IDEA grant. So there are 10 elementary psychologists and one of the 10 is in that grant.
Oh, okay. And then what is Hope to Healing?
That is a new grant that Alicia is securing.
So that's revenue, so to speak. Okay, thank you.
Robin?
The 10 elementary psychologists, I understand that I think 5 of them are within the RC 24, and then the other 5 are for general education population within the elementary school. Is that correct? Because we have 2 per elementary school. And I guess my question is, what is the role of the general education psychologists? What are they doing kind of just in terms of the need for 10 of them at the elementary schools?
I probably wouldn't separate them into the general education psychologists. They're attributed to the budget. They go 50 go into the budget, 24, and then the other budget that Rich can speak to better than I. They work with all students. So they work grades, they take grades, and they loop with their students, K through 5. They're responsible for servicing all students. They go into the classroom and do group lessons with students as well in their capacity for all the grades K through 5. They're also responsible for supporting teachers and working with students for pre-referral, for doing up to MTSS. They might be involved in a child who is a child in general education program without related services or a 504 IP plan. And they do not only MTSS, they support the family, they support the teacher, and they support the classroom.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah?
So recognizing that our district has had some some profound issues in the past few years. And pardon me if we've talked about this. How do we compare in terms of our staffing and our spend for mental health in our DIRG?
I would honestly, certainly some of the positions we have, right, and certainly the leadership position we have is both very valuable and probably unique. It's not unique just as a director position, is probably unique. I haven't compared like the mental health worksheet to other people's mental health worksheets, to be honest with you. I'd have to.
No, I'm just, yeah, okay.
And actually, to be honest, you would maybe get close, but apples to apples, just looking at that list, what another district would provide may be a different list, obviously, right? But I just haven't compared to the other districts.
Dave?
Just following up to that question, Rich, how big an effort would this be for you to grab from a couple DIRGs if this data is available? DIRG A schools nearby.
We could reach out.
Okay. Would you mind? Would you be all right with that, Joe? Thank you.
Anyone else in RC1? Okay. RC3. Yes, Robin?
I had one question just on, Rich, you had provided the number and enrollment of middle schools in DIRG A. So the question that I had was, are we the only DIRG A school that has the team model and all of the others are a junior high model, or does New Canaan, because of its large size, also have the team model, or do you know?
All the districts are team.
All of them, including the ones that have 2 middle schools that are smaller in
Correct.
size?
They have less
Okay,
teams, but yeah.
thank you.
Katie?
Just a point of clarification, it's worth noting too, for anyone that's not aware, that New Canaan has 4 grades in their middle school.
Yeah.
They start at 5th grade.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions in RC3? Okay, then we have the elementary RCs 5 through 10.
Some of these questions we've sort of touched on here and there through the presentations, but
Mhm.
So going back to that teacher absence, it looks like we're trending better. What do you attribute that to?
I'm not really sure, except that the DEA leadership, the building administration and I work closely and we talk to people who've been absent above the average about the effect that it has on their students. So,
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, RC 11. Go ahead.
Follow-up?
Yes.
I'm just looking at the absence data. You talk about the table, Sarah?
Yeah.
Linked, yeah, the bottom, the 24 through, that's through the break in 25. So that's just a partial, year, right?
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're still, if you double it, we're still lower.
Okay.
Well, except that May is a higher rate of absence.
Well,
rate
that's true
usually.
too.
So it looked to me like we were on
I
par
just
for the
thought
year
maybe it
before.
was-
I was trying to build Marge up and you're
Sarah's
not.
being positive, yeah.
Sorry. Okay. RC 11. I think we just talked about that.
I just went on RC 11, Jill.
Yes.
I believe there was I don't know where this came from, but was there a request to see what a 5-year uniform replacement cycle would look like?
I think that was from the RTM questions that were just forwarded, so we
Today.
have not today.
Okay, so that'll be a follow-up.
Oh, and then I did have a question about the security, and I had asked this before, but for the, right now, we have, I guess, 2 off-duty police officers and an SRO at all home games for hockey, basketball, and football. So there was a question that I had from one of the parents that had those teams, excluding football, which I think we probably do need that coverage, but the question was, do we really need the additional police officers at hockey and basketball home games? And what would the cost savings be if we did not do that and just had the SRO?
I mean, I would have to reach out to
Yeah,
Chris.
we'd have to.
As to why.
Okay,
Thank you.
you have all the components of the question, Rich?
You're not suggesting cutting back on the supervision, just the different nature of it?
The question was, do we need the 2 off-duty police officers at every home game for basketball and for hockey?
So you are asking the
Because
question. do we need
other
them?
districts do not do that and there's no disruption. So it was just a question.
Mr. Bright.
Yes, Dave.
I'm not sure about the predicate there. I don't know that I've really tracked that much, but I don't know that I always see that many police at every sporting event. And I don't know how many campus monitors we have. Like if you could provide that data, what we do in each sport first as a starting point, and then we can back into necessity. I think that would be helpful.
This was based on a
Yeah, it was
parent
anecdotal, so let's get a
who
little
was
better
one of
data.
the parents
Cool
of
with
those
that?
teams that asked that question.
Good, yeah,
Okay, got
fair
it.
enough.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Okay. Okay, RC 13. RC 14. RC 15.
I have one for RC 15.
Yes.
I just think in general, it would be helpful maybe if the amount of technology and software, especially in light of the fact that we are trying to reduce overall screen time and just implemented the policies that we did with phones specifically. Is all of the software that we're using, and probably maybe more particularly at the elementary level, being utilized as much, or are there alternatives that would be offline, not requiring technology or computers or Chromebooks? just to give our, especially our youngest students, more of a break from the technology and screens.
That is a discussion that we had at the time. A lot of the recurring expenses in technology are that's a lot of the licenses. Each actual other software package for students or otherwise, we actually went through. Well, not actually, we did go through them to make sure that they were actually being used. We removed some, and we also took we really haven't added anything to talk about in new software. That's extremely limited at this particular point. So we have done that analysis of, are we using this software? Do we need this software? And essentially, we're not getting any new software for this year.
Okay, thank you.
16, any questions, Joanna?
In 16 in the breakdown of the catering budget, you have convocation on for 6,000 and also in an early, I think it's a curriculum RC, you have the speaker for convocation down at 7,000. So what does the 6,000 cover? Because convocation, I don't know if you like have a breakfast, you're feeding the whole district. What does that entail? And, you know, Dr. Adley, when I saw you speak a couple of years ago, I thought that was phenomenal. I don't know that you necessarily need to have speakers, and I don't know if the
Oh,
teachers
believe me, that
necessarily
wears
wanna
off
have
after a while. You're
speakers.
okay. I will say that the convocation speakers, if you have many of the board members have had an opportunity to go. I hope you have found it very helpful. I know it's in line with what we should be doing as a district on our goals and our priorities. They support that. And to date, I feel that the staff has all the staff, pre-K through 12, have gotten stuff out of those presentations, and we've had a number of them from Ron Berger to Mark Brackett, AI, so on and so forth. So they've been, I think many of you have actually attended those particular sessions. So actually do we have the breakdown for it? Do you have the breakdown for it?
The 6,000 is the breakfast.
So that's for all teachers across the district.
Everybody who's attend, staff.
RC, oh, Katie.
Thank you. So I had submitted in a follow-up question to a similar question where something appears twice. So we have for board meetings, including the retreat, we have 3,500, and then we have retreat catering 2,500 in a different place.
Is it 19, Katie?
16. Well,
Or you got, is it the
16.
19 one in
Are
the
you
middle?
talking about the question number?
no, RC.
Is it RC 19? Is that what it is? No?
16.
16.
Still 16, okay.
Yeah.
It's twice in 16, or you said it's in two different RCs?
So on page, in the budget book, it's page 207.
I thought it was the
That's-
breakdown of that 5,000, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was it not the
So
breakdown?
it's
of
in
the
there, and
5,000?
then it was also in BOE meetings. So it was under BOE meetings, and then in parentheses, it said, like catering budget, right? Page 6 of.
And then BOE retreat catering, and in the answer it says the catering at BOTE retreat and
Right.
Rich, can you look into that, please? Thank you. Okay. Anything else on 16? 18? Okay. RC 19? Robin?
One question, just in terms of the increases over time in professional development. Versus, I think 2023, it was 121,000, now it's 165,000. What is the reasoning or, the trend, and why has it increased so much over the past 2 years?
So you're talking only in RC 19, not the question here that references
Correct.
PD across all RCs.
I think I was looking at RC 19 specifically, yeah.
So, I have outlined.
So part of it is the loss of Title I funding. So there used to be approximately $30,000 of Title I funding that covered PD. That loss of that money is now in RC 19.
addition to that, in addition to that, we also obviously have to invest in AP literacy. We have a number of AP courses where our staff is needing to have AP trainings at TAPT in the summer to be current to teach those courses.
Okay.
Okay, so this is, you're on, what are we spending on PD over the years, or are you on the curriculum development spending over time?
It was on PD specifically in the trend in RC 19 professional development when I looked at the RC. Because it was driven by this memo, which was showing the trend.
Okay,
So I'm sorry if my numbers were, they answered the question.
okay.
I
I
did
just
have a,
wanted the board to follow it. Did everybody follow where she's
Yeah.
talking? Yeah, okay, good.
it's RC 19, I'm
It's-
sorry.
I think she's
The
looking at
numbers.
line 25003.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I had another question on RC 19, but it's not in this memo specifically. Am I
That's
able
fine.
to
Go
ask
ahead.
other questions? Okay. The MTSS professional development, which was $12,000. One question is, since we've had our SRBI in place for a long time, what is the need for the $12,000 of training? And if it's behavioral training, one question is, would we be able to use our director of mental health or any of our psychologists that are on staff to provide that kind of training instead of outsourcing and spending $12,000 on, I assume, a consultant to train?
So the plan is to actually use Dr. Dad and utilize her expertise in that area. She has been working closely already with Julie Droller at the elementary level, and then our middle school, and especially our middle school staff, 6-8. You are correct, the major shift from SRBI to MTSS is the behavioral piece. However, as we know in the strategic plan, there are elements of our processes anyway with SRBI as we shift to MTSS that need to be made more systemic across the school system.
So we still need an outside consultant to provide that professional development training?
At the elementary level, there may be some use of an external partner for that.
I was just wondering that the cost was $12,000. That's why I was, I
Partially
wanted
for
to know what
that,
included.
partially, for textbooks that we might use with our
Okay.
staff.
Thank you.
Other resources are, there are manuals for MTSS we might want to purchase.
Okay, and then on the admin retreat cost, the 21,000, which I think was also, was in professional development within RC 19. Just a question, is that typical of the costs that we've incurred in previous years for the summer administrative retreat?
Yes.
Can I ask a maybe naive question? So you gave a further breakdown in the administrative retreat under what books, supplies, and resources you bought. What does professional development in this instance then entail if it's not the materials that you're teaching with? Are you hiring somebody? Like, why is it a separate cost?
So typically there may be someone that we hire, that there would be a cost for that. Usually there are books, I'm thinking that there would be books on 3 different topics that I'd want to buy for the administrative team. That's roughly, for those supplies, it's like the cost of $130 per administrator.
Right.
For the materials, the resources I would buy, and the instructional text that I'd like them to have.
I mean, you gave a very excellent, fully succinct answer on exactly what you were buying, but I still don't understand what the separate line of professional development for almost $9,000 means.
Certainly for the last 5 or 6 years, there's been
A speaker.
I guess speaker, let's say speaker, this past one was Patrick Flynn for teacher evaluation to lead us through the training as
Like a
that.
consultant, speaker,
Right.
expert. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else in 19? Yes, Katie?
I had a question on the chart about enrollment, teachers and admin over time. So when I looked at this chart, since fiscal year 18, we are down 141 students, down 25 teacher FTEs, and up 4.3 administrator FTEs. So that equates to for every 5.6 students we lose a teacher. And then for every 32.7 students we lose, we add an administrator. And I was just wondering if this was part of a concerted vision or if someone could explain that trend of less teachers and students and increasing administrators.
So just, well, if you're looking at that particular chart, the story of that, and the numbers on the right-hand side, just to give you a wee bit of a sense, the 31, I think it's FY 19 to FY 20. That's when the department chairs went from 0.8 to 1.0. When it went from 32 to 33, that was a change we made with the music department chair. Colleen went to K through 12 for art and music. From 21 to 22 was the elementary assistant principals, the implementation of special education, the offset of the SES facilitators, and then 37 to 36 was the elimination of a director of information technology here at the high school. So yes, we did make an investment a few years ago with the elementary model for special education in particular. We've essentially replicated that model at the secondary level. I would say that, and maybe parents think differently, but I would say that parents have been happy with that model, and they've been responded to. Our teachers are seeing more of administration on top of that. Our students are seeing more of their administrators. But we basically replicated the model at the elementary school for special education. We have just over 30% new administrators, basically from jobs that we sort of set up in place from last May. And we've got basically over a third of the administrative staff are just settling into their new positions this particular year. For people who have come across the country, you've interviewed here, and we've just placed in a variety of administrative positions. So it really is, for the most part, it's just settling down into the model that we actually have here. And it's not just a one-to-one with, I don't say this casually without looking at it, but you can reduce some classroom teachers, but you perhaps still need a special education director. You still need someone to oversee the whole English department, but just because you lost so many students doesn't mean to say you're going to lose automatically an administrator there. So it's not just one-to-one. You need a principal in every building. Some people may think differently, but anyway, you need a principal in every building. So some of the things don't change just because of that. But at some point, I understand the question.
Dave.
Thank you, Rich, for putting this together. I had a couple follow-up questions on this. And again, not looking for an answer right now if you want to come back. So we have 36 administrators listed here, and then down below it talks about 40 to 42 showing up for the. Can you just give me a detail between these two and like where you see staffing and what?
Or, I mean, just quickly, like the difference, it's like Dr. Adley, Shirley, Marge, Amy, so unaffiliated administrators.
No, I get it, but if you just give like a breakdown, like this 36 number, how did we get to 36? It's X number of principals and X number, yeah. So just, that would be very helpful. Thank you. And again, if you want to give on the DAA and affiliated staff, that'd be helpful. Just want to get the full scope. But this is very helpful. Thank you. Alan, just a comment you just made talking about some of the changes we made in the administration. I'm thinking back to when we had the change proposed in last year's budget dealing with the world language coordinator. And one of the things you had suggested was that should be moved down and not be a department chair. One of the reasons you gave us, I think, was that sometimes it's just better to do that model. Now reflecting on this for back a year, can you give us some successes, some wins, some pros and cons? Now we're looking back and we've made that
Yeah,
change.
well, we've had our world language department chair, teacher leader here, right, at the curriculum committees. And so he's been given some updates there in terms of what he can do. But the one thing he can't do is accountability. Right? And at some level, I think you want some accountability. Yes, he can go in, but it's different. It's different getting into classes as an administrator than it is going in as a teacher. Now you can say, well, is that a bad thing? No, but it's just different. That's all, right? So he hasn't been able to do the teaching and learning evaluations of the teacher. That's the one thing the one big thing that is missing in that particular model, and the sort of accountability in the actual classroom itself. certainly you can get, certainly you get a level of expertise in the actual language itself. That has gone smoothly. He's reported here, Scott reported at the table here that has gone smoothly.
Thank you.
Robin?
Just following up on Dave's question, I thought that you're talking about the department chair role. I thought they did not do teacher evaluations. I thought the assistant principals did the evaluations.
They do for word language. They have to help out for word language teachers. And they do other ones, but predominantly the department chairs are doing evaluations.
They do, oh, okay. Thank you.
They also do the goal setting, the mid-year conference and the end of year conference, in addition to the observations.
I would say, like, if you asked me to go back again, I mean, I would perhaps go back to the model that we had before, but that's a different question.
Indeed. Okay, anything else in 19?
Just a quick question.
Yes.
Under what are we spending on LPD over the years, include the cost of substitutes. For this year, next year, looks like it's 8,000 more than the year before. Is that just because of what they're learning, or is it just, why is it a little higher?
So the budget, so the 24 spend happens after the budget, and so it's really closer to aligned with 23 and 22. Where you had 18 and then 22,000 for the years before. So it's also the timing of when the budget's created. A lot of times they can't get subs too. So that's part of the reason why you see that lower number last year.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't understand that. Why is 24 so low?
So 24, part of it is we couldn't get subs. And then also when you build the budget, so when we build the budget for 25, you're really looking at the 23 data because you haven't fulfilled the 24 year. And so if you look at the 23 data, it's 18 and change,
Right.
much closer to that 20 number.
Thank you. Okay, 24.
Jill?
Do you have a- Yeah, that's there.
Thank you for the out of district tuition breakdown. That's really helpful. I would love to know, and I don't know if it's possible, but I would love to know how our unilateral placements compare to other districts in our DIRG. I don't know that it helps us this year, but I think it's important to know in comparison to others.
You want an aggregate cost?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I don't know how you could break it down for other districts, but
Rich, and we'll start with Rich and then Shirley add. Is there anything, Rich, that you feel like you could provide?
I don't know how easy it would be to get
Yeah.
that data. Some districts do have it separated in line items, you could sell on placements. Some districts like us do non-public and public, some just do one bucket. as
Right.
total. So I don't know how easy or quickly it would be.
okay.
Or
Do-
how willingly some districts.
I mean, it's, anecdotally that, families that I know in Westchester County and other schools here, like, it seems like we are very high, but I don't know if that's accurate or not.
What I could do, and I know that we had spoken about last time, I can ask in our DIRG if they'd be willing to share their information.
Okay.
Because we have DIRG meetings, I can ask if they'd be willing to share that.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, anyone else on 24? Okay, 26. Robin?
Rich, would it be possible for the pre-K tuition for the comparable kind of communities? Could you also add Norotan Presbyterian Nursery School and also St. Luke's?
So we
For
did
the-
ask for Norotan based on the finance committee. We're just waiting to hear back. But we can ask for
And St. Luke's as well. Thank you.
You say 3, please, or just 2?
No, just those two.
Okay. All right. So we've got couple other questions. I'll just open that up more broadly. If there's anything inside of the other bucket that people would like to talk about, prior to capital, I'll separate that. Go ahead, Robin.
Just one thing I was looking at the transportation, the 6-year trends. Just one question, is I happened to be in New Canaan recently and saw that literally the bus depot basically, that they have like 25, at least 25 Suburbans, a number of like 47 capacity buses, and then also the 77. So the question that I have is, I mean, if we had a bus depot, obviously that's another issue, but would it be possible if we mixed the capacity or changed the mix of the transportation that we provide depending on the capacity of the different routes? Is that something would give us additional cost savings? You
So it would be
probably
more,
already looked
so it
in-
would be more expensive because when you, so they do have some smaller buses, and some of the reasons they have that is just the terrain of New Canaan and some of the narrower roads. If we were to go from 72 passenger buses to like the 50-pack buses, it does affect the tiers too, and so you would end up with more buses. So really having we have 25 72 passenger buses is really the most cost-effective way to provide it.
Okay, and then just one suggestion, the annual opt-in process that we had done for a number of years has stopped over the past couple. Can we
So-
reinstate that? Just
So
to-
we wouldn't want to reinstate it. So so the reason we had the opt-in was due to COVID. And so we had a track where students sat on the bus. The reason we got rid of it, by and large, most parents didn't acknowledge the opt-in, opt-out. And so what would happen at the very beginning of the year is parents would flood the office with emails, phone calls, concerns that their students were going to get transportation. And you could not keep up with the flurry of emails and phone calls to the point where you'd get 3 and 4 more. It didn't provide any cost savings or understanding of who's riding the bus, because what we do during the year is a census. So we have an idea of how many people are riding the bus. The bus drivers take a census every day. The reason we can't eliminate buses or collapse routes has to do with the timing of the buses. So typically an elementary school bus, you'd like to have be no more than 30 or 35 minutes. You also only have less than an hour between when the high school drops off and they have to go to the next tier. So if you wanted to collapse a bus, you're looking at an elementary school age child being on a bus for probably an hour and 15 minutes. But you couldn't even do that because if you got an hour and 15-minute bus ride, by the time they left the high school, they'd be late for, let's say, token or Henley. So the opt-in, opt-out really didn't provide us any data where we would be able to say either we could move a bus from one school to another or, we could collapse a bus. What it really did was create a lot of anxiety amongst the community.
Okay, thank you.
We also added that bus, right?
We did add bus 25 a few years ago.
Jill, I had a couple other.
Yeah, just on that, and that bus serves all 3 tiers,
No, it only does 2 tiers.
secondary.
No, it does the high school for bus 25, and then we did utilize it for Royal in order to kind of speed up the routes. It's not necessarily for Royal, but you're paying for it, whether you use it for 1 tier, 2 tiers, or 3 tiers. But it's primarily just for that 1 tier thing.
Thank you. Yes, Robin?
A question just on healthcare. I know that you explore all options as much as possible, but I know that many, even for-profit companies these days are doing different things with the way that the plans work with the HSAs or with embedded deductibles versus aggregate deductibles on a family level, which can basically enable you to be more cost effective in terms of our overall exposure on medical loss ratio, et cetera. I mean, have you explored all those?
Any change to the deductibles has to be negotiated with the unions. And so right now we have a 25.5 deductible. If you wanted to change it to 3,000, 6,000 or 4,000, 8,000, whatever number you do have to negotiate that with every single union.
So for instance, for family coverage, there are some ways that they do it where every individual in the family would have to meet the deductible before any payout happens.
So you have to
And you
negotiate.
still have to
So you
negotiate
have to
that too.
negotiate any plan side changes.
Okay. I had one more question. Sorry, on food service, just in the object detail. Why is the management fee increasing $132,000 or a 5% increase in this next year's budget?
So it's a combination of 2 things. One, it is tied to inflation. And so there's a built-in increase for that. And then as we move people off district employees, and more employees become Chartwell's employees, there's a greater cost that you're assuming there.
And there's no negotiable amount to lessen the amount of the management fee increase. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Katie, I'm sorry, I had a question from RC 19, if we
Go
could
ahead.
just go back. Thank you. So in one of the follow-up questions was about the stipends for the elementary curriculum specialists being eliminated. And the answer was given that the director of elementary education has and will continue to take on the responsibility. So it's not clear to me why we have a reduction of a little over $24,000. So on page 230 of the budget book, which is line 690, in account 21,220, curriculum and supervision am I misreading what that $25,000 reduction is for?
Those are the 5 stipends that are in place this year.
Okay, so then I don't understand. This says that the elementary education director has and will continue to take on these responsibilities. So currently this year we,
Right, we can
Okay.
edit that. Currently, we have them.
so this is,
new.
okay, so,
It's a wee bit misleading because it says that the director has assumed them this year.
so they're
She's taking on
being
more.
eliminated for the director to assume the responsibility. And so can we talk a little bit about why we think that's the best choice then? You know, I think that part of the reason they were put in place was that there's 5 elementary schools and, you know, the importance of ensuring continuity across them. And I would think especially with the upcoming year and what's going on in literacy, they would be really valuable.
So from a curriculum and instruction perspective, you'll probably hardly ever find me not wanting to advocate for supports for our classrooms, curriculum instruction, assessment, and professional learning. I think we had talked about the importance of the coordinator position that we had, and it was just a matter of looking for places that we could make cuts in the budget. And so while we have a director of elementary, she's taken on many parts of the coordinator role from last year. These stipend positions have been helpful. But again, we just had to make difficult decisions across the budget.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty low dollar amount for something that I would imagine is pretty important in the coming year in particular. Okay.
Okay, any other questions in the document? All right, we'll move on to the overall budget discussion. That's you, sir.
That is me. Okay. Well, we left off a couple of things. Well, I need some guidance from the board in terms of, may not be tonight, but just how we get to the number we.
Can we pull up that slide just to?
I didn't, this, do you have that slide? This slide, I didn't change this slide because I didn't want the board to think that there's changes going
So
on.
this is where we left off, and then I'll.
This is basically where we left off, and you can see that really option 2 for now is really the only options in place since the board made the decision last week to restore the IDA program. So option 2 is one option. The consideration 3B, again, consideration 3B includes the ECR reimbursement. So you don't have to include the ECR reimbursement, but that's an administrative recommendation to do that. That's our best judgment at this particular point, but we'll see. We can see how that sort of plays out. Down at the bottom, there's a athletic fee participation and then a combination of clubs and intramurals and so on. We can get there any way we have to get there, fees, otherwise, if the board wants to even participate in a fee structure. But you can see under option 2, it was the class sizes that we were talking about, and then a variation of participation fees to get us there. And in consideration 3B, it was the class sizes and an expansion of intramurals, club fees, and paper participation. That's kind of what gets us down to the numbers in the vicinity, which is 4.37 or 4.39. If the board wants to look at something else, I guess that's up for discussion, but these are the current proposals of where we left it. PLC's in this, and these particular reductions are in it. I think that's about
Okay.
About to summarize it.
Okay, I think, based on what you just said, I think the first question for the board, just to confirm, and I certainly would recommend that we take into account the ECR reimbursement of a lower ECR reimbursement, because it's likely, the reason it's lower is because the volume of claims is higher and the state pool of money hasn't changed. And I think we can be reasonably certain that the volume of claims will continue to be high and uncertain that the state will change the pool of money. So Rich, I assume that's why you all are recommending Rich and Shirley.
So in order for the reimbursement rate to go up next year, one of two things has to happen. Either the state has to put more money in the budget or district claims across Connecticut have to go down.
Right.
Both are unlikely.
Okay, so are we in agreement? We'll leave an adjustment for ECR down to 65.
I think that makes sense.
Okay,
Madam Chair.
all right, great. Yes.
May I just update the board that there may be a public benefit reimbursement from the electric company for about $44,000. We don't know that completely. In fact, I think Richard has got some information to suggest they won't know until July. The town has put it in as part of their budget, anticipating it. So either the town shouldn't put it in, or we should put it in. I don't think we should be on different pages about whether we put it in or not. So at this point, we're building it in as a saving at 44, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yes, Dave.
Sorry, just for this slide still up here. Rich, do we have participation fees in any sports right now?
Some of the sports do have what they call voluntary participation fees that are collected. The district does not have participation fees outside of the rental fees.
Right, okay. Can we get is that something we have visibility into? Is that a big lift?
The rental fees?
No, just what.
The voluntary
The
fees.
volunteering. Can we-
It's on the chart.
Oh, it is right.
Yeah, it's on the,
Perfect.
It's
Thank
on the
you.
athletic spend
Yeah.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, okay. So I think overall, part of why we've identified, being in this ballpark that we're in is we know that the guidance from the Board of Finance is 3 to 4%. They haven't updated it. We're a little over that guidance. I think we're trying to stay in the ballpark of that guidance. Now, when I say trying to stay in the ballpark of the guidance, our first job is to understand what it takes to be there. So this is one way to meet it. I think, having talked to a few different board members, we realize that these conversations are extremely difficult. We'd like the opportunity to look at some other options so that we can best understand the trade-offs. We're interested in hearing more about some changes that might not be directly in the classroom structure. We understand everything impacts the classroom at the end of the day. That's what we're here for. But so we're asking you all to look carefully at curriculum, staffing, PD, and development, to look carefully again at technology. Might be some other things. Rich, you've said there's nothing in transportation, but can you wave your magic wand some more? Look carefully at the use of consultants. Are there areas of duplication in mental health or anywhere else where we might be possibly duplicating? Would be a couple of suggestions as places to start if anybody would like to add anything. We're asking you to think about something in the neighborhood of $1 million. That's not because we're looking to cut an additional $1 million from the budget. It's because we're trying to understand the opportunity cost of any decision that we make. Rich, is $1 million, you think, an adequate number?
So it depends on where the board wants to be. So currently, the budget's a 492 with the restoration of talented and gifted and the ECR adjustment. So $1 million probably gets you to about that 4. And if we were to put options on the table in these categories, depending on the appetite of the board, you may hit that 1 million or you may end up being below it because some of the items you just might not have an appetite for.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
So just for, can I just ask some clarifying questions? Just right. So just to get down to $1 million here, given what we put on the table, right? That's potentially going to touch some other things potentially that may impact other constituents
Yes.
that haven't been at the table here or.
Yep.
Right, so I'm just sharing like, okay, I just,
So that's the risk, right? Is we certainly are aware that a lot of parents of second and third graders and their PTOs don't like the class size. And we're aware that we've heard some people from a few people about fees. We're aware, we've certainly heard from the IDEA community. We've heard, what's the other thing we're getting a lot? Oh,
Paras.
certainly we've heard a lot about paras. Thank you. So yes, the risk in asking this is that there are additional cohorts that will be unhappy to hear their interests named. But I think that there's a feeling that we need to understand, we need to understand what the trade-offs are.
so Madam Chair, just to be clear, has my guidance changed?
No,
No.
yes, Robin.
I guess the way that I would venture to ask this is just, for instance, the grade 2 to 3 increase in class size in particular is an area where I would think that that really would hit student instruction and learning. And so the way I would like to look at this is if we can come up with maybe an alternative to having to do something like that, as another option. Not that we want to cut another $1 million out of the budget.
We do not. That is
No.
not the ask. Correct. We are not looking for, the guidance is the same.
Yeah, I think the ask is to see what else there is that is not directly student facing. And you can, to Jill's point, you can argue that everything is student facing, but in the classroom, what could there be?
Katie?
I would echo what Sarah just said. Absolutely looking for things that are not impacting the direct classroom. And then I would also say, while I understand these are much smaller numbers that are not getting to a percentage point, it seems to me that, a theme that we could comb through very critically is catering. For example, I think the board was probably happy to pitch in and buy our own lunch or brown bag it. So things like that, when we're looking at facing even just the discussions about impacting student, I really want to see this budget as lean as possible in every administrative and nice to have area.
Robin?
And I would also echo the reason I asked for the comparables, for instance, for ELP, is that I think a lot of the neighboring nursery schools actually have already increased their pre-K tuition. And at the very least, I think we need to, if we can, keep up with a lot of the increasing costs that we are having to incur, for instance, with play-based learning that now has to be also implemented within ELP, the professional development, the resources, all of it has a cost. And I think it would be good for us to at least look at our comparable nursery schools and pre-K in the community and think about that as an additional potential revenue opportunity.
Okay.
Can I be clear, just because
Yes.
the administrative structure I haven't put on the table? Is the board looking for me under this direction to come back with administrative reduction? Because if that's like, I don't want to come back here and you didn't listen to me because
Well, for curriculum, we asked you to look at staffing, development, and PD.
yes.
So I think you're probably going to have to look at administrators to look there.
I just want to be clear what, like,
Well,
Yeah.
earlier you mentioned an old model when it comes to teacher expertise and who's, going back to teacher leader positions. I would like to know what that looks like. If you, went back to what we had before department chairs. I personally love department chairs. I think they do a great service, especially for parents. But in this environment, I don't know if that's the best way to move forward when we're trying to change class size and take out supports in the actual classroom. So I would like to at least see what that looks like.
and go as far back as 0.8, 0.2, 0.8 and teacher 0.2 leadership.
Or,
But
I mean, what do other jerks do?
right, they're different. Oh, right.
Yes.
Yeah, you're.
So, just in case I've just, with my earlier comments, invited a flood of additional public comment, we are thrilled to hear from the public and for their engagement. But we have to make our decisions not based on the number of people in any given cohort that opine, but rather on the relative educational merits of everything. So just to be clear, it's always helpful to hear, but it isn't a function of the number of feet.
Right. And what we did last week was an anomaly. And
Yes.
that's not how we normally operate, but it is what it is. So.
Yeah, sure.
So to be clear, it's not the board's necessarily intent to go down to like 4%.
No.
I just want to just be helpful for me in terms of.
Dave, go ahead.
I mean, for us, we would goal for us to hand it over to you and then that's what's actually being done. So you can get it free, but yeah, the other point I would make is Rich, and we modeled some of this last year, we gone with the partnerships, gone back to our model, and I think there's some costs associated with sending people in teaching jobs, and how we absorb that. And I don't think we've had any changes in turnover teaching, or how we absorb differently than it was last year, or any thoughts there?
So if a department chair was reduced, by contract, they would keep their salary as a teacher for a full year. And so the reduction is effectively the lowest tenured teacher in whatever discipline. And so we would have to look at what that is by subject.
I'm sorry, just clarification, but that would be for the first year realization.
Correct, just for the first year, assuming that the department chair stayed.
Right. So if that was a conversation that we were really looking at having, it would make sense to look out a couple of years to understand what the long-term
Yep, so we
savings
could look
is.
at multiple. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Robin.
Just in the context of, this is obviously a tough budget, and the discussion we're having, I think, would make me also want to potentially maybe take another look at some of the things that we said were initiatives that we wanted to include, for instance, the board docs or the website kind of changes, or things that were nice to have for our communications plan. But at this point, I would almost want to also look at some of those items as well. And the EduPlanet additional licenses, I mean, is all of that a good thing that we need to do right now, or could it be deferred?
Well, these are things we've been talking about for a year, right? But that doesn't mean to say they gotta go through, so it's.
But we didn't have this information in front of us at the time that we talked
I'm
about
glad you
those.
pointed that out, because neither did I, so. Thank you.
Okay. Any other things to add? So we have our next steps. Thank you all for the time and the preparation that went into this evening and for making an additional night to meet this evening. With that, I'll turn it to public comment.
Good evening. If anyone in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. Once you've been recognized, please state your name and address for the record and note that you have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please note the time with the chair. We will begin with in-person and move to online.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kevin Davis from 3 Saltbox Lane. I'm here this evening representing the participants, parents, coaches, families, and fans of the approximately 150 Darien High School students from the squash, skiing, sailing, and rugby teams. I'd like to start by thanking everybody here for their dedication to Darien school system. We have the luxury of living in a town that provides an excellent education, and that would not be possible without strong leadership. So thank you. We're making a statement this evening to formally oppose the 340 per participant copay included in the draft budget. As proposed, originally proposed, I understand there's alternatives. This copay only affects non-SEAC teams, which are squash, sailing, skiing, and rugby, on an inequitable basis. SEAC teams are not subject to this additional copay as originally proposed. The proposed copay is above and beyond current copays that our teams are subject to, and will not result in any direct benefit or additional funding to any of our 4 teams. To put the proposed increase in perspective, the additional copay would result in a 59% increase to the current copay paid by squash players from 579 to 919 per player. A 97% increase for skiers from 350 to 690 per skier. An 85% increase for sailors from $400 to $790 per sailor, and an infinite increase for rugby players from 0 to 340 per player. Across the approximate 150 participants, this additional fee amounts to about $51,000 per year, which is disproportionately applied only to our 4 teams. The significant increase in copay this represents may result in some of our students at Darien High School not being able to participate in our 4 teams. We wrote the board last week with our concerns, which were primarily, why does this copay only apply to non-SEAC teams and not all teams? And why not distribute this $51,000 increase across all sports, which would make the per participant increase more significantly manageable. We fully understand that balancing a budget is a difficult task. We understand that when costs increase, it is necessary to find additional sources of revenue. However, any new or increased fees need to be applied in an equitable manner. Singling out non-SEAC teams is not equitable. The suggestion was made earlier this evening to have the board look into how the current budget is allocated on a per participant method, across various teams. This is a suggestion that we support strongly. We think it's very interesting, and just the reference to baseball versus track, that's a huge disparity. That's a disparity that I think needs to be looked into further, and we strongly support the additional analysis into this. We circulated a petition to supporting our opposition to this additional copay. So far, as of this speech now, we have about 170 signatures. We're not asking the board to respond this evening, but we are asking for your dialogue and continued discussion on this going forward.
Thank you so
very
much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brant Kaiser. I live on 6 Alpine Lane. I'm a senior at DHS.
And I'm Hayden Strebel. I live on 23 Raymond Street.
Me and Hayden started playing rugby as freshmen without knowing anything about it. A junior at the time encouraged us to try it, and Hayden convinced me to give it a shot, and we've loved it ever since. Truthfully, I would have never played if there was a $340 fee. I definitely would not be standing here. My parents, like many others, would have hesitated to let me try a brand new sport with such a high cost. Imagine how many prospective players would face the same situation, hesitating or not even considering rugby due to the cost, resulting in fewer players and potentially no team at all in the future. Through the years, me and Hayden have recruited a solid number of players because we love rugby and want others to join the community. But convincing someone to join the team is difficult, and adding another hurdle in them convincing their parents makes it almost impossible. An example being our friend who joined as a junior. He had never played rugby before and loved it so much that he now plays at Clemson. I texted him today and asked if he would have joined for $340. He said no. And that's what makes rugby special. Not the game itself, it's the community. The bond we have as teammates and alumni is remarkable. I was recently talking with a different alum who graduated 2 years ago, and he was convincing me to go to Auburn and join the team there. I also asked him today if he would have tried rugby with a $340 price tag. He also said no. And final, we're seniors. This isn't going to affect us directly, but we love this team and care about its future. We want to make sure that others have the opportunity to fall in love with the sport and the community, just like we did.
Thank you, guys.
So I think rugby is especially like a separate situation because a lot of kids, there's no youth program. So the kids coming up have never played it before. So it's kind of a big price tag to make them pay $340 for the chance that they're going to like it. We kind of try to recruit a lot of kids with like, you don't like it, doesn't matter. Like just come, show up to one practice, just have fun, try it out. But if there's that additional cost, you have to get through the parents, not just the kids, but the parents as well. So it just makes it an additional step, which prevents kids from experiencing the community and just like the athletic benefits. I know that like sports in general help with academics as well, and just a community, so you feel more bonded to the school.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Hi, good evening. My name is Gail Baldwin. I'm at 80 Good Wives River Road.
And I'm here to share my deep alarm about the proposed austerity level cuts to direct student instructional resources in general, and about the proposed elimination of all instructional paraeducators and proposed elementary class size expansion in particular. My husband Newland and I have 3 children, second grade, kindergarten, and 2 years old, and we moved here to my husband's hometown in large part because of the quality of schools, like most people in Darien, and we see this budget as a notable step backwards in student services in the district. Specifically, the proposed budget fails to identify the real problem leading to para absence from the K and first grade classrooms, the lack of subs in schools. It falsely equates the contribution and quality of tenured paraeducators with young college students who have no classroom experience. It fails to suitably account for the 10 weeks of direct supervised instruction each intern is required to complete, and also fails to contemplate that universities may find Darien's program to be less attractive. They may be less interested in partnering with Darien when they realize the de-resourcing we've enacted in the program. Paras already spend 25% of their time as substitutes if we cut down the headcount from 3 to 2. And also have the 10-week required training. They're going to be spending upwards of half of their time as substitutes. And I don't think that's exactly what universities are looking for internship programs. The proposal fails to account for the value of paras in attending to the academic needs of students, and they are essential teaching resources. Their presence enables students to receive instruction while the teacher completes one-on-one assessments, thereby increasing one-on-one time for each student with their teacher, without which children may fall further behind. It also fails to contemplate a potential resulting medium-term increase in special education utilization, which I think is far from settled science. Ultimately, it devalues our current teachers by asking them yet again to do more with less. Finally, families considering moving to Darien pay close attention to the town's investment in its schools, a budget structured to shrink so much after adjusting for inflation, and remove direct services to students is sure to impact the town's relative standing in Fairfield County, setting aside the absurdity of us having this conversation sitting on top of a brand new island. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me.
Hi, my name is Kristen Anderson. I live at 125 Poverty Hollow Road up in Newtown. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the very dedicated 15 instructional aides you have proposed to eliminate. Each year we are included in the proposed cuts, and each year we were put in the stressful position on proving our worth. We are an easy target for budget cuts because you do not see what we do, so you assume we do nothing. Our work with children isn't tracked by data or reviewed at meetings. We quietly provide support for students who need help but are not eligible for additional services. We show up year after year, steady and consistent, helping your children and our teachers and administrators with whatever assistance they need. Rather than read you a list of eclectic duties that we jump into each day and try to convince you how indispensable we are, I would rather talk about our love and dedication for what we do. What will you get if you proceed with the current proposal to swap 15 veteran staff members for 10 college students? At Oxbridge, the 3 instructional aides that have remained after last year's cuts have over 40 years of combined experience working directly with students in the Darien schools. This is 3 staff at one school. Multiply that number by our 5 elementary schools. The proposal is to discard us and replace us with 10 college-age students, each of who will have roughly 0 hours working in the school system. Imagine the number of students that your 15 instructional aides have had the honor of working with over the years, each year watching your children arrive on the first day of school, helping them navigate recess and the lunchroom, helping them learn letters, sounds, numbers, addition, subtraction, then division and fractions, writing sentences, learning cursive, writing persuasive essays, watching them make their first friend and each new friend after that, being with them every school day for 6 years, celebrating their happy days, drying their tears on their tough days, saying goodbye when they move to middle school, and cheering them on when they graduate high school. Imagine how very proud we are to have some of those students come back as aides and teachers, now our coworkers. We love our jobs. We love the variety at each day. We love seeing each of your children grow, mature, and move on each year. We're invested in their future, hoping to help each and every child become the best, brightest, and happiest person they can be. Will eliminating 15 long-term dedicated employees and replacing them with free and experienced college students save you money? Absolutely. But in 9 months, your free interns will move on and be gone, and you will have gotten what you paid for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Crystal Hill, CDSP Chair. In listening to the discussion tonight about paraeducators, it seems that the issue is quite simple. We do not have enough support staff in our elementary buildings. We don't have enough staff to cover our substitute needs and provide the consistent teacher support in the classroom, which our teachers have clearly communicated that they need. So I continue to ask, how is reducing the support staff from 3 paraeducators to 2 student interns remotely going to solve this problem? I can't help but wonder that without the pressure of budgetary guidance from the Board of Finance, we'd be even having this discussion at this point, as it doesn't seem to really meet the needs of students at all. And I'll go back to the public comment I made back in November when this board provided budget guidance to Dr. Adley. At the end of the day, the most important job of this board is to meet the needs of their students.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Beth Waters. I'm a resident of Darien and raised my 3 grown children here. And I'm also an instructional para at Tokenique Elementary School, and I've worked there for almost 18 years. The needs of our community have grown immensely since I have began and since I raised my kids here. Not only do we have children with special needs, we have children with anxiety, depression, family trauma, social emotional issues, English as a second language, as well as the need for academic support. And I also will emphasize that we do not have an ESL teacher. Our reading teacher and our math specialist take the time out of their day and work with these children. They are godsends. Basically, the whole staff pitches in with these children who come to our schools and do not speak a lick of English. All of these require attention and more times than not need one-on-one support. In a class of 22 or 24, this is difficult for a teacher to handle on a daily basis, especially with our rigorous, ever-changing curriculum. That's where an instructional para comes in. As longtime instructional paras, we are familiar with all students, their families, how buildings conduct their day-to-day operations, and we have solid relationships with all staff. If interns replace us, they will not have the experience, knowledge, or time commitment that we have. It will be a revolving door that would take a toll on our children. And what will you do when you have one of the interns on their 10-week student teaching? You will only have 1 person as opposed to 3 instructional paras. Sometimes we help the interns, believe it or not. We teach them. If interns replace us, I said that, I'm sorry. It will be okay. If you place the needs of our elementary school students first, please don't cut a first line of defense for them, instructional paras. It will affect the quality of education at every school where we hope to make a difference, 1 child at a time. Thank you so much for your time. I will say also about paras in kindergarten. They are so important because in kindergarten, we don't really identify children. They're too young. They come in, it's a mixed bag. We don't know what's going to be. So a teacher has this whole room of 17 to 20 kids. And there are so many problems that come up. We're always there. We're not interventionalists, but sometimes both psychologists are busy and the admins are in meetings. Who's there for that teacher when a kid is having a tantrum, when there's a child that looks like maybe they're going to be special needs, but they're not identified? So we're there to help. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Would anybody else in person like to participate? To our online participants, please use the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. Mr. Jonathan Ford, you have been recognized and unmuted. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Jonathan Ford. I'm a resident of 23 Edgewood Road here in town. As residents of Darien for the last 3 years, we've watched as continued cuts have been chipping away at the education system that brought us to this town. Listening to these discussions, though, it's clear that you're all working hard to navigate a very difficult path and use our funds efficiently. But I couldn't help but notice going through the documents on a real basis when we compare before COVID and the resulting inflationary shocks that occurred, the budget is down. And so I kind of wonder, more of a question for the board, as you continue to explore options to minimize the impact on our students, are there steps that the community can still take to support you to expand those parameters you have to work within, so we don't have to make those cuts and can perhaps rebase the budget to catch up to sort of the modern world, and manage to avoid future cuts, and then unnecessary kind of budgetary expansion down the road? I think it'd be useful to kind of see if we can help drive the discussion to sort of reset and apply this diligence going forward rather than continue to sort of chip away at our great system. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no more raised hands at this time.
Okay, with that, I thank you all for being here this evening again. I thank members of the public online or otherwise, or here in the room for listening in. And I will take a motion to adjourn. That is Robin, seconded by Joanna. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.